Today we're talking about the WPA, or the Works Progress Administration, which was a Great Depression New Deal era program done by Franklin D. Roosevelt. It employed millions of Americans, and it is still to date the largest public works project ever to exist in America. You're watching Discover Jamul. We're here in the heart of Jamul, where a WPA water crossing still exists and is almost 100% intact. And there's a lot of things to unpack in that sentence. Who is the WPA? What is a water crossing? And why on earth you'd be worried about it being intact? So let's back up, all the way back to the 1930s. Coming out of the Great Depression, Franklin D. Roosevelt put together, during the height of the Great Depression, what was called the New Deal. And that assembled a variety of entities or work programs that essentially brought back to work millions of Americans. Now, the WPA, or the Works Progress Administration, is truly the largest public works project that ever existed in the history of America. It employed millions of Americans during the 1930s. It was created in May of 1935, to be exact, and ran all the way through 1943. To give you an idea of how important the WPA is, and how far back into history we have to go to really understand a time during the Great Depression when millions of Americans literally couldn't put food on the table. They were starving. There were soup lines round and round the block. Churches were feeding the masses in every community. Neighbors were feeding neighbors. My grandfather worked for the CCC. My stepfather's father worked for the WPA back in Pennsylvania. I can understand there was a time in history where saying that a family member may have received help from the WPA or a job from the WPA could be embarrassing to a family. And I would argue that with this much time going by and understanding the degree of hard work and craftsmanship that entity put out and made for the rest of us, life being a little easier to recreate, easier to transport or to ingress and egress a community. Now, the WPA operated in every state of the country, focusing mainly on rural communities to increase farm access, bring in water solutions, or improve wells. The WPA took on the harder, heavier tasks, the bigger funded projects. The CCC really relied on hard work. The WPA relied on a mix of hard work with obviously larger amounts of concrete and modern day machinery, trucks, and early steam shovels. This particular water crossing, which is an at-grade crossing of the water as opposed to a bridge that crosses over the water, this has not been part of the public right-of-way for almost 70 years, which is really unique because it's still intact. Both sides are still stamped WPA. They have their capstones, which is an unworked piece of granite that is essentially bookending either side of this concrete retaining wall, which is a series of field stones gathered here locally and assembled by masons from the WPA, worked with a hammer, and put together with very tight tolerances. You can tell WPA and their sister agency, the CCC, or Civilian Conservation Corps, their work is exceptional in the quality. These stones are fit together very tightly. In some cases, it almost looks like dry stoned stacking, where there's as minimal grout visible as possible. This one has some pretty decent sized grouts, but again, this is a massive 2-foot wide retaining wall that drops way down into the creek. There's a concrete deck underneath this asphalt deck. It tells you it was built in the mid-1930s. So when you see something like this water crossing here, which is an at-grade crossing, when water would come through here during a seasonal flow, a vehicle, at the time it could have been Model T, Model A, a variety of early V8 Fords and Chevrolets and other cars that were made in the 30s, could have crossed here and had the safety of this being a paved crossing through a watershed area. And this large concrete retaining wall is essentially made mostly of large stone, very tight tolerances, and that's a sign of WPA work. So this about 45-foot water crossing is extremely unique because the top layer of concrete is in perfect shape. I'm going to show you in a moment the stamping in both sides of this water crossing. And it's stamped 1935 to 1938 with the big WPA initial in the middle. And on either side of this water crossing are little initials inscribed likely the foreman of the masonry crews that were out here. Another unique part of this water crossing is the unworked granite caps on either side. You can see behind me this roadway, which was an early county road, was realigned in the 1950s, which is why this WPA water crossing is in such incredible shape. It has seen very little use over the last 70 years. It's on private property that is protected from public access, and thereby is essentially then protected, large oak trees shading it. It's in incredible shape. I have witnessed a lot of historical artifacts from all over the world, from CCC, WPA, Division of Highways before Caltrans was long in existence, and I can tell you this is one of the most unique and interesting artifacts from early highway history that I have ever had the pleasure of coming across. If someone tells you that Jamul is a little tiny obscure dot on a map, I would remind you that we hold some incredible history from the Great Depression. The WPA, the federal government, obviously felt that the farms in this area were important enough to send federal aid to employ workers on. And any of the national parks, regional parks that you enjoy are likely also a product of the CCC or potentially WPA work infrastructure. So a water crossing of this caliber would typically have been replaced by a bridge at some point over history. Water crossings were a cheap, easy way to have access that guaranteed, for the most part, not to be flooded out or at least washed out. The County of San Diego likely did an asphalt overlay a couple times on this until it was abandoned or realigned in the late 1950s. Again, this piece of WPA history is exceptionally rare to survive in this condition for 90 years since it was constructed. It is on private property, so I'd ask that if you know where this is, respect the property owner, and if you don't, just appreciate that we were able to bring you this and show you a little bit of history. So the next time you're in an area and you see old stonework, old concrete, looks like it's in great shape, maybe unweathered, or the concrete looks so strong and so different from modern concrete that it just looks a little out of place. It might be CCC or WPA work, and look around, see if you can see a stamp, or maybe Google the area and see if you can find a little bit of information. The chances are there's a little history right underneath. So thank you for spending some time with me out here in Jamul and talking about the WPA, and paying a little respect to the masons of the past and the craftsmanship that they put out.
Thank you for watching Discover Jamul, where we invite you to explore San Diego's best kept secret. Hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss out on a Jamul adventure.